Hi, my name is Minnie, and I am doing my restoration presentation on receiving a fullness grace to grace. So this comes from Unit 8, the Kirtland Revelations, and is directly related to major concept number 2, Jesus's and humanity's divine nature, growing grace to receive God's fullness. At this time, it was already known that Jesus was and is perfect, and it was also believed that Jesus Christ was both somehow a divine being and a human. And so this doctrine, which comes from DNC 93, helped us to learn that Jesus Christ was and is perfect, but he also had to grow grace by grace, meaning he, through experience, through his, through small and simple things, was able to realize his divine potential and grow and learn and eventually fulfill that divine potential, which was kind of unheard of at the time. And so this was a really revolutionary doctrine. I said that this doctrine is supportive doctrine because it really helps us to understand who we worship, meaning we worship a Jesus Christ who is perfect, but he also experienced going through and developing little by little and over a period of time. And so that's really powerful because Jesus Christ not only knows what we're going through because he has felt our pain and all of our emotions and afflictions through the atonement, but he also went through this process himself, and it makes it a lot more meaningful, I think. And it also tells us, we can continue to follow in Jesus Christ's example and grow grace by grace. I think I didn't call it a core doctrine because you can go through all the saving ordinances and reach exaltation, and technically you don't have to know this, right? But this gives us the motivation and the understanding, contextualization that we need to help us continue on the covenant path. So the academic sources I used were Bryce L. Dunford's He Received Grace for Grace, and then our very own Professor Sweat's A King and His Crown, What, How, and Why We Worship. So these sources were really, really insightful. They both came from the BYU Center for Religious Studies, and it really helped me contextualize how I can apply this doctrine in my life, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The church sources I used were Elder Uchtdorf's What is Truth, which talks about what things we need to look for and how we can increase in our wisdom and knowledge and interpret truth. And then Matthew McBride's Man Was Also in the Beginning with God. And this kind of talks about how it was always part of the plan for us to learn and progress little by little. And that's how Heavenly Father works in this pattern. The DNC verses, of course, I had to add, where the revelation actually came from, DNC 93, 12 and 13 and 20. And that says, and I, John, this is John the Baptist that they're quoting, saw that he, Jesus Christ, received not of the fullness at first, but received grace for grace. And he received not of the fullness at first, but continued from grace to grace until he received the fullness. Then the Lord tells us, for if you keep my commandments, you shall receive of his fullness and be glorified in me as I am in the Father. Therefore I say unto you, you shall receive grace for grace. And so we see how we can follow Jesus Christ's example in this. And then DNC 98:12 tells us, for he will give unto the faithful line upon line, precept upon precept, and I will try you and prove you herewith. I think this is really powerful because it tells us that repeating pattern that Heavenly Father isn't just like, oh, okay, you be perfect, or here's in all this information, but that he always reveals little by little and expects of us to grow little by little as well. The Joseph Smith quote that I found from the papers was, you have got to learn how to be gods yourselves, to be kings and priests to God, the same as all gods have done, by going from a small degree to another, from grace to grace, from exaltation to exaltation, until you are able to sit in glory as doth those who sit enthroned in everlasting power. So I thought this was really cool because we learned that this is the way of God, right? We increase little by little and grow little by little through our experience. And that is what is going to help us receive exaltation in the end and fulfill our divine potential as priests and priestesses and gods and goddesses. And so, yeah, I think it helps us to not be as worried. Oh no, I'm not perfect yet, but it's okay because Heavenly Father expected that from us. Key concepts, right? Jesus Christ was perfect, but he didn't know that from the get-go. It says in the New Testament, Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and favor. And so that means he too had to go through this process of learning. And then the second concept I had was that the grace of Christ is really necessary in this process of learning from grace to grace. Sometimes we have this tendency to believe that like it's up to us, which yeah, we need the effort, but we're never going to measure up to our divine potential right now because we are imperfect. It is through the grace of Christ that we can grow and get one step closer to reaching perfection. I think it's really important for us not to compare ourselves to others because we're all going to the same place, and that's what this quote was talking about. I liked it says, right, we must stop worrying, and our only focus should be on the next step. The next step meaning, you know, being a little bit better each day. And my key takeaway is, yeah, just that. Don't let the vision of perfection turn into perfectionism. We often, in members of the church, have this tendency to have toxic perfectionism, but we're not expected to measure up ourselves. We can rely on Christ and work with him and be patient with ourselves. Thank you for listening to my presentation.